To lie is not only to say what isn't true, it is also, and above all, to say more than is true, and, as far as the human heart is concerned, to express more than one feels. How often do you lie to yourself? You are in the midst of a storm. The world is happening around you, and it sweeps you this way and that way. There are many things to do, and many ways of looking at things. How do you respond to it all? Do you let yourself be small and get thrown around? Who are you? Do you even need to answer that question? The stranger offers a subtle revelation here. In the midst of all the things he says, the way he says them, and the things he doesn't say, there is a quiet but unflinching dedication to self. This begs the question, what is meant by self? One way to answer, the self is a way of looking at the world. The self is the world seen from a point of view. It is what you think is real. The self is your choice to stare into the clouds as they get soaked in the light of the setting sun against a blue sky. Meanwhile, the other calls for your attention in the direction of some flashing LED lights that try to compare to the shine of the sun. Expectations come about in this and so many other ways. Ideas of where you should look, how you should act, how you should respond. The idea that you should respond at all is an expectation as great as any. But what if something else, some other way feels right? What if nothing feels right? What do you feel? How is the world presenting itself to you? Whether you realize it or not, you have an answer to this question. But you have to look for it, listen, and tune into yourself. And there is no shortage of noise to draw you away. Guilt, shame, shiny objects, and all sorts of peer pressures are manifestations of the siren's song lulling you to sleep, making you forget that there even exists a self underneath all the noise. In all his strangeness, Mersault's obtuse reactions to the world are nothing more than the external manifestation of a man who is in tune with himself. He doesn't cry at his mother's funeral because he didn't feel it. Nothing more needs to be said. And yet, it is not hard to come up with ideas like, what will others think if I don't seem sad? Or, he must be cold-blooded if he doesn't feel the need to cry at his mother's funeral. From the outside, I must admit, I also think it's a sign of derangement to not cry at your mother's funeral, to completely fall short of feeling such a normal emotion. But then I remember birthdays that felt like all the other days. I remember listening to popular songs that didn't move me. I remember nights where I didn't feel excited about going out partying with friends. And then I understand Mersault, who didn't cry at his mother's funeral. When you don't feel something, nothing more needs to be said. You didn't feel it, and that's all. How often do you lie to yourself in times like these? What if we never did more than felt right? What if we did exactly and only the things that felt right? There is the primitive fact of what is felt, and this feeling is always a feeling about the world. Then there are all the secondary facts about what the feeling means, whether it means that you're an asshole, or you're weird, or that you're a cold-blooded murderer. These are always feelings about the feeling, rather than about the world. Mersault does not consider these secondary facts. In talking with the chaplain, he says, I said that I didn't believe in God. He wanted to know if I was sure, and I said that I didn't see any reason to ask myself that question. Like Pascal's wager, which tries to alter the primitive facts on the basis of secondary facts, to alter one's feelings simply because of what the feelings mean, Mersault refuses these pressures. They make no sense for him. I do not want to say that the meaning of things does not matter, just that they are secondary, and that there is something more primitive which they are based on, and which should therefore be given its due consideration. There is a rhythm inside you, and it is so easily drowned out by the noise of others, with what-ifs and but what-abouts. Following Mersault's adventure through the world, we are shown what it looks like to care only about the primitive facts, about that rhythm that you are, and which decides the things you like. There will of course be consequences for this. Mersault ends up getting his head cut off after all. All that can be said is that it is unfortunate that Mersault's primitive facts, his feelings and his instincts, led him to kill a man, and to be sentenced to death. Our instincts, our self, are not always good. But good is a secondary fact. There are of course valuable improvements to be made by worrying about the meaning and the consequences of actions or feelings. There are valid considerations regarding being friendly, undifficult, or courteous. But there is a limit here which, if we do not respect, we will lose all sense of self and become a pawn in someone else's vision of the world, It is necessary then, above all, to be dedicated to oneself, to tune into yourself, and to be willing to accept the consequences. Emerson writes, "If I am the devil's child, I will live then from the devil. No law can be sacred to me but that of my nature. Good and bad are but names, very readily transferable to that or this. The only right is what is after my constitution, the only wrong what is against it." We cannot let this fear of self stop all our willingness to create ourself. The stakes are not usually so high as life and death, but there are always stakes. There is a cost to doing things your own way, and there is a sacrifice in drowning out your desires to go along with other people's rhythm. Like a lifelong diet of burgers and cigarettes will add up, so does a lifelong diet of forsaking your choices in favor of others. It's the difference between being happy and self-confident and being lost and insecure. Mersault listened to his body. He was in tune with his self, and did nothing more than that. This is why he says to the chaplain, who steered his life by the direction of books and men in robes, "He seemed so certain about everything, didn't he? And yet none of his certainties was worth one hair of a woman's head. He wasn't even sure he was alive, because he was living like a dead man. Whereas it looked as if I was the one who'd come up empty-handed. But I was sure about me, about everything, surer than he could ever be, sure of my life and sure of the death I had waiting for me. Yes, that was all I had. But at least I had as much of a hold on it as it had on me. I had been right. I was still right. I was always right. I had lived my life one way, and I could just as well have lived it another." The meaning of things can always be questioned. It is always uncertain what will be the consequences of our actions. It is always up for debate whether we did things right or wrong, or whether we missed potential, whether there will be an afterlife, whether God will accept us into heaven, whether we have pleased our judges. These are all secondary facts, and maybe it is better to simply call them questions about primary facts, because without the world, without the primitive fact of my existence in the world, there is no sense in asking about the meaning of things. We are given this fact, the fact that we are alive, that we did one thing and could have done another instead. This fact is true, and yet the chaplain and so many others throw this certainty away and dilute it with questions about the facts, about what comes after or before, about what is underneath or above, and meanwhile they lose sight of that which is here and now. This is why Mersault says he has always been right, because he took his facts as they were given to him and lived with them as certainties. I can be sure that the sun makes me tired, that I like the way that cloud looks, that I want to do this and not that. If I listen to these primary facts, I can live always being right. And when Mersault says, "That was all I had," he shows a humility that the chaplain and so many others do not. It is a bit greedy to take what you are given and ask for more. Take the life you have, and instead of living it, to go and ask what it means, or what others will think of it, or to ask for another life before you have lived this one. So what we find in this study of Mersault is that he limits himself to what he has. He has some feelings, and he doesn't have others. And what Camus meant when he prefaced this book by saying that to lie is also, and above all, to say more than is true, and to express more than one feels, and that Mersault is a man who refused to lie, is simply that Mersault kept faithful to the limits of what he has been given. He kept to the primary facts, his own feeling and understanding of the world. Thinking of him, I find myself at times questioning the feelings I have, or the things I want to do. I feel myself putting on a mask to try to force a feeling that isn't mine. And all of a sudden I am overwhelmed by my lies, by the fact that I'm hiding from myself, repressing my own primary facts. And I adopt Mersault's character to give me the courage to tell myself the truth, to say nothing more when nothing else needs to be said. Mersault did not play the game perfectly. There is some importance in analyzing the meaning and consequences of our actions, and we are sometimes right to tell a white lie. But these things get out of hand easily, and it is not uncommon for a man or woman of 40 years to wake up one day overwhelmed by the amount of lies they've told, finding themselves so far removed from who they want to be and the life they feel is right. Mersault's character points at that North Star within each of us, which is always there, revealing a rhythm and a path through life which is guided by what feels right, by our own self, and which says nothing more.